Welcome to Simply Awesome People. I have the pleasure of welcoming Huzefa Olia, co founder and COO at 1Kosmos. I have had the sincere pleasure of working and seeing and observing his leadership. I'm really fond of the style of leadership that Huzefa has, and you'll see why, hopefully, through our conversation today. With this, I would like to welcome Huzefa. Huzefa, welcome to Simply Awesome People.
Great to be here, Tushar. And thank you so much for the kind words. Right, and it's been always a pleasure working with you. Great to be here as well.
Likewise, and maybe if we find time, I'll tell you more about why I said what I said, specifically about the style of your leadership, which I feel would benefit so many leaders in the industry. Uh, Before we do that, Josefa, would you like to tell our audience a bit about One Cosmos and your role at One Cosmos?
Yeah. So one of the co-founders here at 1Kosmos, and I run overall operations. In layman speak, if I have to put it, yes, we are a startup. So essentially, we run at rapid pace, and as you can tell, whenever you're running at a very, very fast pace, you want to make sure that all the different departments are cohesive. They have the single mission and focus that is driving them forward. So my role is to provide that kind of clarity and vision right across multiple different departments.
Awesome, awesome. Um, Maybe just jumping straight into it, right? What do you think is the role of senior leadership in forming and shaping the culture of any organization?
Yeah. See, I think senior leadership is most of when you talk about your team, right? They essentially know, what functions that they have to do. They are the experts, right? If you look at an organization, if you look at different functions, there is R&D, there is the business side, there is HR, finance. They're all experts in their own individual domains. Um, but I think the role of leadership is not to, go in and define, hey, how you have to do your job better. They are much better at what they have to do, but essentially provide much more meaningful insight and clear vision, right? So I have primarily focused on how can we communicate better? How can we provide more clarity of what the organization's mission and vision is? And remember, in every organization, as they're evolving, that keeps changing, right? What my objectives are for year one are different from year two, and so on and so forth. How do you carry that forward? How do you make sure that every individual leader, every individual member, knows what that particular message is, absorbs it, right, so that they can essentially do their job easier, right?
Awesome. I think the essence of what you shared, in my perspective, is people drive the purpose. The leadership's job is to empower people to do better in driving that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Empower them, give them clarity, communicate, right? So that essentially any, changes that are happening, right? Any pivots that we need to make, right, in the organization, everybody's on the same page when it comes to that, right?
Makes sense. I'll talk about your style of leadership, or the two things that I've observed and I admire so much. The first thing is humility, and the second thing is your incredible ability to navigate through conflicts, especially when there is contradicting perspectives in your peer group. I've seen that so profoundly and consistently over the last so many years for you. Um, how critical is for leaders to navigate through conflicting ideas, suggestions, thoughts, especially when an organization is a startup, because there's going to be, if there are 10 leaders, there's going to be 10 different ideas, 10 different perspectives. What's your best practice, and maybe if there is a recommendation or advice for other leaders in the organization from that?
Great point. Great question, Tushar. But I believe conflicts are important in an organization. I think that's what makes an individual shopper a company shopper. If you have 10 different ideas, right, there will be 10 different conflicts which are there. What is important though is trust, right? Um, you need to trust the person next to you. You need to trust the person across from you. You need to trust, all your leaders and every individual within your organization. Ideas may change, ideas may clash, right? But if you have the trust, right, you can always find the common path. So when you talk about resolving conflict, right, it's not more about how you have to, navigate that. I mean, that essentially be a dialogue. You have mutual trust, which brings mutual respect as well. You can navigate it, right? And that's a day-to-day thing that happens, right? And it's a great thing because you have, multiple different ideas coming to you. But what is most important as a leader is to establish trust between individual members, right? And again, that comes back to clear vision, communicating to every individual, right? What are we trying to do so that they know that that there is transparency, right? Which essentially brings a trust as well.
Awesome. I think very beautifully said. In the context of the talent market today, what are top three business challenges that you are facing as a CEO?
I mean, talent today, it's a very changing landscape, right? And every all the different ways that we were working with, people has been, constantly changing. I think the talent pool today is vast and enormous, but what happens is that we as organizations, technology is evolving even much more faster, right? So there's number one challenge is that hey, what you may have learned previously, it was uh, something that you have know or learned right over the last 5 years. Maybe now it is not valid anymore. Today's day and age, it's become for the last 6 months, right? You may be proficient in a certain skill, but that may have become antiquated. So finding individuals, right, and in fact, empowering individuals within your current organization itself, right, to keep those skills updated is extremely important right now. Uh, Apart from that, know, uh, talent is now become much more global as well, right? Previously, we were looking at, a couple of different geographies. We have US here, which is a great talent pool. There was a bias, or not a bias, but essentially people leveraging Asia, right, for a bigger talent pool, which was there. But now we have, talent across the world. You're talking about Central Europe, you're talking about, Africa, LATAM as well, where, you know, because technology information has become so much more abundant everywhere, right, that the talent pool is across the world. So what we are trying to do as a company, at least what we try to do, is just keep your eyes open, right? Not restrict yourself to certain geographies, but keep an open mind where the talent comes from across different regions. I'm not sure that was the question that you were going for,
Yeah,
right?
makes sense. I think tying to that question, right? For individuals that do not have any experience in the cybersecurity domain, specifically identity or authorization, the domains that 1Kosmos is best at. What would be your advice to such individuals with zero background in the domain to start working towards gaining expertise and then landing or finding a job in the cybersecurity or the identity industry?
Great question. It's we had an internship program this summer, right, where we had a lot of college grads who are graduating. In fact, we had high school kids as well, right, who were
Oh,
interning
interesting.
with us. But the reason why we chose these individuals, none of them are doing cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity is a skill, you can learn it, right? It's just like something that you give enough time to, you will be able to to grasp it. What is more important for us is critical thinking, right? how are you navigating certain scenarios that come across you, how you can essentially manage those by yourself, right? So that's important. Second is empowerment, right? Down to the level of any individual who is entering their work field for the first time or entering cybersecurity for the first time, right? Empowering them and making sure there's certain guardrails as well, right? So they don't feel that they're completely lost, right? And the third and my favorite one that I'll come back to is communicating their goals, right? So I think those are the three principles we've gone by, right? Because identity and access management, in fact, is also changing. What we learned in identity and access management 10 years back, it doesn't apply anymore, which means you have to constantly keep learning. But these three things are more important, right?
Interesting insights. I think it's very interesting that you also invited high school students into the internship program. That's something that I feel we don't see very we don't see very consistently happening in most organizations. It does happen in you go to a Home Depot, you go to few other tech organizations which are huge, but for an organization for that's your size at this point in time, I think that's a pretty big leap forward. And I would love to keep in touch with you to learn about uh, specifically about the experience of the high schoolers in the internship program. Um, my my next thought is
I'll just
around.
I-
Sorry,
I'll
go ahead.
just add to you. I think we are not utilizing that a lot, right? As an industry today, absolutely, we look for, especially in technology, we look at somebody who is leaning towards a technology background. Somebody coming from computer science, somebody coming from you know, an area which has some technical expertise, and we bring them into the fold, right? I found that when we got high school kids, number one, they were much more eager to learn. Okay. And it was completely like a whiteboard, right? So you can essentially give them the guardrails and telling them that, what we are looking for is in your critical thinking on how to solve individual problems. And I was surprised, amazed, right, by it. In fact, we want to double down on that right next year. Yeah.
Makes sense. You know what you said is so empowering for following reasons. When people, especially in the tech or consulting business or professional services industry, when somebody refers to tech or technology, folks that do not have an educational background in technology feel that this is alien technology. Technology is so hard. Technology has, I'm making these air quotes. It's overblown to an extent where it's made to sound that it's something that not everybody can know and understand. But the way you narrated, um, not just the experience with the high schoolers, but your vision for high schoolers is only telling me that anybody that wants to learn more about technology is same as learning anything new or different in life. Is that true? Does that
You're
align with?
completely true, Tushar. In technology, if you look at everyone who has, left their impression in the field, not a lot of them have come from a technology background, right? Or not a lot of them have even completed, what they've done in technology. Mark Zuckerberg as an example. But if you look at an overall pool, even in cybersecurity, the top leaders who are there, they are not coming from a traditional technology background, right? Um, so I feel, especially at an entry level, right? You want to ensure that people have more of the tools for the trade. You put enough time, you're sincere to it, you're gonna learn it, right? Um, I know so many of co-founders, right, who have come from various different backgrounds, no, and they're leading great companies today, but none of them have any kind of a technology experience, right? It's just that you spend enough time with it, you apply, your skills, right? Those things are something that you can learn.
Makes sense. A related question is, do you think there is a gap between what's taught in schools, specifically undergrad programs, and what the industry actually needs?
Yeah, cybersecurity, yes. Okay, because there are not a lot of programs which are out there, and cybersecurity is very vast as well, right? Somebody may have a diploma, they may take a certain credit course in cybersecurity. They may be touching on certain aspects of it, but they may not dive into it. And as you know, what we deal with is identity and access management, which is, you can say, a small sliver in cybersecurity, but so vast by itself, right? So it's very hard for courses to cover that, in my opinion. Um, but again, there are programs that are developing when it comes to it. Uh, will should we have more time or more investment in that particular field? Absolutely. And I think it may be the onus on certain companies themselves, right? Because now everybody's looking at a talent pool coming from universities, that how we can start training them from that aspect. I'll give you an example. When I was talking about more of global outreach, so in Central Europe, they had a lot of success when it comes to optical recognition. So you take a picture, and then from that, how you can essentially compute information. In that region, there were a couple of companies who found success. They partnered with universities, and now the talent, professors, the coursework is very much aligned to it. Okay. So, but the reason it happened was security companies found that, hey, this is an area which it's a niche, but we found some success, right? So why don't we invest with our people, right, for them to learn? And now it's just like a good community of engineers who are coming out of in that region.
Wow, that's interesting. Makes sense. Maybe a slightly simpler question. If you had an unlimited budget, what would be that one employee benefit that you would like to announce to your teams?
Oh,
Unlimited. It's a hypothetical question, by the way. So,
I mean, I've not thought of it that way, Tushar, right? Because I've not thought of a benefit and tying it to money, right? I have always looked at a benefit to say that how you can make your experience at work much more easier, right? And then whatever we can do with respect to as a company. Okay. So if you want flexibility to work with, great. Want to take time off, you don't want to be restricted, right? To say that, oh, I only can take a certain week here or here. Yeah, you can. You be the best judge. Work with your teammates to get there, right? So I think I sorry, but I didn't. My mind is not tuned with respect to any kind of a monetary benefit. Absolutely, monetary compensation needs to be there. You need to be provide fair compensation to everybody.
yeah, no, makes sense. And by the way, and if you realize, right, there was a question behind this question. Actually, your response is a more insightful response. Your response your answer is a more probing question, and money is not everything. If you talk to many people, right, and I have the pleasure of working with so many people every single day, we realize that a paycheck or a bump in salary makes somebody happy for 3 months, 6 months, maybe 8 months, but then everyone's back to what they're doing, and what they do for the most of the time is, or what they enjoy or not enjoy or experience for the most of the time, is those interactions, the flexibilities or the lack of those flexibilities that people have in organizations, right? And realistically, we end up spending way more time in our jobs than we would spend anywhere else, which means if you as a leader are thinking about making or helping people not just balance but blend their work and life together, where work is not a stressor but work is a part of life, I think no other benefit like that could beat, means that benefit beats any monetary benefit in my own opinion. But again, I think I got what I was asking for, and I got more than what I was trying to ask for, but thank you. This past weekend I had the pleasure of being in DC in a workshop with about 20-ish HR leaders across the US. So these individuals are very passionate about the field of HR, very sincere in what they want to do, very intentional with wanting to do better for the profession of HR. One of the topics that we discussed was stakeholder management and the importance of stakeholder alignment for HR leaders to effectively drive the mission, vision, purpose, and making the lives of people better and better in organizations. Piggybacking on that question, what is or what would be your top three piece of advice for HR leaders to be in best alignment with their business leadership?
Great question, right? So I think the great HR leaders, right? The first thing that they focus on is the culture of the company. Okay. Um, Everything else operationally, that's secondary, but to build the culture within the company. And to build the culture, what separates the great HR leaders is essentially you have to strive that within leadership themselves. Okay. uh, good. There are great leaders who are there, but they sometimes are not honest to building that particular culture. Right, just they get sucked into what they have to do. What I have noticed is with very very good HR managers, and you were one of them, right? To keeping leadership, saying that hey, this is what we have to do to increase morale, right, or essentially bring in some more fresh experiences within the company, right? So it doesn't go one way down, okay, from leadership to HR down, but essentially it goes in both directions, right? um, so I think that's primarily a fundamental component, right, that HR leaders have to work with. And the second is, of course, business leaders. Again, they essentially have a vision, right, of what they have to do every year in their department. And I keep focusing on the whole mantra of every year because as an organization, you change, right? You evolve, you grow, right? So you want to keep those checks every year. But HR and leadership connects are extremely important in that cycle, not once a year, but a much more repeated one, right? And in that, I also believe it's a two-way direction. Hey, not alone that what I'm looking from HR, right? But Mr. Leader or Miss Leader, right? What have you done, right, for your team, right? How is the morale today, right? Is everybody feeling empowered? Everybody feeling okay as well? So, lack of a better word, I call them, the culture officers, right? Culture enforcement officers, right, within the organization.
Makes sense. I have an observation for the last maybe few years, and that observation is whenever there is that disconnect, um, it happens for following reasons. A lot of business leaders, especially folks like yourself who are co-founders, are unconstrained thinkers. At the same time, a lot of business leaders are also risk takers. Now think about HR and HR leadership. HR is trained every single day to do things by the book, to contain the risk for the organization, to take risks but measure first mindset. And wherever there is a disconnect, right, that disconnect occurs where that overlap between the style of the leadership and what HR wants to do does not blend in well. And one of the point you made was that it's a handshake. So my suggestion to my friends in HR, and this is obviously I've learned from people that are way better than myself in HR, is I like to call myself as the conscience keeper of the firm and the leadership. In being the conscience keeper of the firm and the leadership, sometimes I also have to tell my leadership when things are not going well, and I have to tell them the way they are. At the same time, I want to protect my leadership from pitfalls or potential risks that they may face. Um, And when I said conscience keeper, right, there is no job description for this. But what's your perspective on that? When I talked about founders and co-founders being unconstrained
You
thinkers.
nailed it. You nailed it. You were so right when it comes to, founders, co-founders, senior leadership, unconstrained, right? We essentially just go and say, hey, can we just essentially do it? And most of the HR says, you may want to, look at, certain boundaries, right? And Yeah, that is absolutely important as well. And I also believe it is more with respect to, sometimes when you're thinking, there might be certain, people component that as founders we may not be, looking at very closely. That's where, HR essentially has to come in, right, and say that, hey, we may have to look at it much more closely. We may need to align our values, right, on, future decisions as well, right? And that's where great HR people do, like you said. You're empowered to, to talk to the leadership to essentially say, we may not be going in the right direction or not in the best direction possible, right? So how can we, revisit that as well?
Makes sense. Um, my next thought is around AI, and there is a lot of skepticism and doubt about what AI can and will do to individual jobs and roles in the firm, in any firm for that matter. Uh, Recently, I read through multiple articles. I think there was an article on Harvard Business Review. There was a Stanford lecture that I attended. There's a bunch of there's an article that came up that was published from by MIT, and many of these. I think the crux of these three resources that I read through was a lot of AI implementations aren't as successful as many of these firms thought. And I think a couple of things fundamentally that were highlighted in this article were uh, many organizations were trying to build these AI solutions hastily, ignoring the fact that is this technology even necessary or needed. Other aspect, I think this was the Stanford article or the HBR article where they realized that mid management wasn't empowered enough to drive a lot of the communication change management.
Mm.
And in the context of this, right, what's your perspective on what AI is doing to roles currently and what it would do to roles?
Mm. I'll tell you the shot. I'm a huge proponent of AI, right? I want to champion AI, right? But the way I look at AI is, this is the next landscape, right? I mean, this is something that everybody has to embrace, right? And the option here is AI not to replace people, but people embracing it so that they can innovate faster. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of it. But here's what I have been doing. I have essentially said, for the last few months or year and a half, AI is something that we have to embrace. I've gone to every department head and told them that AI is something that you have to inculcate, and then tasking them to look at it more with respect to how you can start embracing AI. So, an example would be from an engineering standpoint, right? If you were developing in a certain pattern or a blueprint, start thinking about how you can do it with respect to AI. If you have a customer success function, uh, you were uh, you were investing, a lot of your cycles, right, in talking to the customer, how you can incorporate AI into it as well. But for a leader to just go and say how you have to, incorporate AI also is not very helpful, right? You have to empower them, you have to enable them. So we've sent them to AI workshops, right, to learn, so that again, it's not taking your job, but you're learning, how to develop with it. And at the leadership level, the mindset we've given is in your bandwidth today, right? And what you do, maybe, if it was 100% that was occupied, bring that down to 60 to 70%. Your 30% of your bandwidth has to be around innovation with AI, right? So the idea there is, again, and it's not just at a certain individual level, but every individual tier, right? Down to a developer, if you're developing in a certain way, use Copilot today, right? It's not eliminating, but what we need to do is we need to innovate faster. And we're a software company, that's very, very important to us. Um, Speed to market, being a startup is very, very important to us. So I really feel organizations and people and more than organizations, people who embrace AI, they are going to benefit from it a lot more.
Makes sense. I have a very hyper simplified analogy, and obviously I'm going to be wrong in 6 months because everything's changing. Uh, my hyper simplified analogy is, so my parents had a Remington typewriter when I
Mm,
was growing up. I think many of the 20-year-olds today might not even have seen a typewriter in real life. Um, and I was kind of growing up in the times where computers were picking up. Computers were entering every household, and then the industry also. And all of a sudden, right, the jobs that or the typewriters were doing was in a snap of a moment replaced by
computer.
computers, right? But expanding that analogy to the industry, right? Many typewriters at the typists at that time might have felt that, oh, all of us are going to lose jobs because there's this computer. But what actually happened is typewriters' jobs exponentially expanded. People that were able to type and produce maybe an X number of pages were now 10xing, 100xing because they could just replicate it, repurpose stuff that they had. At the same time, it created a huge market for people to create art, sell art, expand that. Think about,
Sure.
and this is my hyper simplified analogy for what's happening in AI. I'm very optimistic. I strongly believe that people should not be worried about AI. And you made a very specific and a very relevant point. And I like the way you're thinking about it. You want AI to be one of the tools in the toolkit for your people. Great insight. Um, Maybe my last question for the morning, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self today?
Oh, be patient. I think it is. Um, I would essentially tell myself that everything is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. I think 25-year-old me was pretty much trying to solve every problem in a day. And sometimes you make a lot more mistakes. Mind you, learned a lot from them. I think those are much more valuable lessons. Um, but I think I would tell that it is a marathon, right? And in that particular marathon, don't relax though, right? Sustain your pace. Sustain your pace because what you need to achieve is far bigger, compared to, what you may need to tackle tomorrow.
Awesome. Amazing. With this, we'll end our episode. Uzefa, thank you so very much for taking time from your busy schedule to share so many insights with our viewers today. And I want to wish you and One Cosmos all the very best for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tushar, as well, right, for inviting me. I did not know that I have a lot of nuggets to share, but thank you in at least letting me share some insights over here. What you're doing here is phenomenal. I think the industry needs this. A lot of leaders needs to understand this as well, right? How we need to be working with our people. So this is a great initiative, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.